Good afternoon. Welcome to the afternoon committee sessions for August 29th, 2016. Our first committee is Finance and Personnel, and Roxanne Murphy is our chair.
Well, welcome everyone to the Finance and Personnel Committee. I am joined on this committee by Councilmember Hamill and Councilmember Lillquist. We have one agenda item. It is the 2017 quarter financial review. We have Brian Hinshaw, the Finance Director. Please take it away.
Great. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Council. Brian Hinshaw, Finance Department. This will be a quick summary of the financial summary for the second quarter, year-to-date numbers through June. I'd like to start by saying that it is online with all our other financial reports, and you can see that on cob.org website under Finance Reports. We'll start with jobs. Whatcom County non-farm jobs have averaged about 90,000 year-to-date. That's about 1,600 more than last year. That's a good trend. Job creation is one of those things that we like to see. The Bureau of Labor and Statistics reports that the unemployment rate is 6.3% for Whatcom County, 5.8% for the state, and 4.9% for the country. So good trends both nationally and locally for job creation. The other trend that we like to track here is the year-to-date building activity. So far through June, the Permit Center has processed $106 million worth of permits. That's up 57% over last year. We had done $68 million through June of last year. Good growth in all categories, single family, increase in permit activity, a slight decrease in multifamily so far this year, and a very large increase, $20 million in commercial industrial permits, and then this other category, $24 million increase is all other permit activity so far. I would just point out that Rick has pointed and identified that it is slowing. This is not a sustainable growth rate, but we do anticipate that it will continue in the next year, but at a slower pace. Citywide revenues are $115 million for the first 6 months. This is up from $112 million last year, or 3%. I'll just go through this graph. On the top line here is the budgeted amount for the 6 months, and then the 2016 results, and then compared to last year's 2015 results. So the top one here is utility charges for services. This had the biggest growth year over year of 13%. On interfund sales and transfers, we have an accounting change. We are no longer billing for interfund labor expenses, so we direct charge those instead of creating an invoice and then grossing up the revenues. So we have a slight decrease this year over last year, but it's on track for budget. Sales tax growth so far is 4% over last year. And then down here in rentals and loans and interest, this unbudgeted amount year to date is for the new water treatment, pre-treatment plant. This was a loan that was received and will be drawn down as that project progresses during this year and next year. The other one I'd point out here is grants and entitlement. Grants are usually tied to capital projects and will be drawn down as the projects progress too, and we haven't gotten into the construction season yet. Citywide expenditures are $102.1 million. This is down slightly from last year of $104.2 million. Basically, we're up overall on the operating expenses 7%. So the decrease is again tied to the capital projects here. We have a very large work in progress or backlog of capital projects. We have $85 million budgeted, and we've only done $9 million year to date. And that's slightly below last year where we'd done bigger projects earlier in the year. So this will catch up going now into the construction season, what we've just gone through with summer and fall months. We'll quickly go over some of the major enterprise funds. The first one is Street Fund, and enterprise funds are those funds that are predominantly paid by user fees. And the Street Fund also receives sales tax, impact fees, and some fuel tax revenue. And what I've done here is I've taken out capital to make it less skewed for the bigger projects, and this will be operating expenses comparison. And so this is the revived budget revenues of $11.1 million. The 6-month forecast would be about $5.6 million, and year-to-date we've just been a little bit under that. We're just over $5 million. So you'll see here it's a little bit below on the forecasted revenues of $500,000. On the expenditure side, though, we're at $11.2 million of budget. 6 months would be 5.6, and we've spent $5 million, so we're ahead on the expenditure side. So overall, street is tracking very well on the operations side. Water fund is similar to that. It's a bigger revenue stream of $25.2 million. We've achieved just about right on 50% of the revenue, so that's tracking very favorably. And on the expense side, we're under on the expense side year to date, and that's about $1.2 million to the good. A lot of this has to do with just projects, operational expenses. So again, this was at June 30th cutoff. We're going into the warm weather season. They'll do more projects, both capital and operational, so I expect to see this approach to budget by the end of the year. Any questions on those two funds? The last two enterprise funds that we talk about are wastewater fund and the surface and stormwater fund. Again, the wastewater fund budget has $21.4 million of revenues. We're tracking very well. We've done $10.7 million of anticipated revenue in the first 6 months. We've achieved greater than that, $11.5 million. So we're to the good, about $800,000. On the expense side, we're tracking very close to the on to budget. So overall, the wastewater treatment fund is about $2.2 million at 6 months to the good. Surface and storm has less capital projects. They did a lot of capital construction last year, so operationally they have some other ongoing projects that are happening, and they're still tracking below on the expense and a little bit below on revenues. Moving to the general fund 6 months revenues $38.2 million. This is up $2 million over 2015 revenue. It's about 5% increase. Utility taxes, which are tied to a lot of the utility charges that were talked about earlier, are up 8% for the year. Some of this is seasonal. We bill the utilities bi-monthly, and so we're every other month there's, depending on the routes, some of the revenue goes up and down. B&O tax is at 7% over last year. Sales tax growth is at 4%. And I'd just point out that most of the sales tax and B&O tax growth has been attributed to the construction industry and also the related construction industries, so suppliers, specialty trades. We are still seeing a downturn in general merchandise, which is our largest category. I think a lot of that has to do with Canadian shopping and also online shopping, so that continues to decrease. This is the third year in a row that general merchandise category has decreased. But construction is strong and leading the sales tax increase, and also automobile sales and repairs continue to be very strong. So those are the two categories that have the most growth. General fund expenses, $35.2 million. This is up 1% over last year, June of last year, of $34.9 million. The largest increase is in salaries and benefits. You see that we have a large budgeted amount here. It's increased over last year, and we've got 7 contract settlements and retro pay that have been paid out this year, and we have one more large retro pay contract that'll be paid in August. We just paid it out last week, so that's not reflected in this number here. Salaries and benefit makes up 71% of the general fund, so that's about $54 million out of the $76 million that's budgeted in 2016. The next slide shows general fund expenditures of $35.2 million. Again, it's 46% of the budget to date. This has it broken down by department, so you can see like on the top line here, executive budget is just under $900,000. 6 months worth of budget would be $437,000. They've spent $423,000, so they're favorable, under budget. All departments are under budget or at budget except for IT, and IT has a lot of maintenance contracts that are paid for in the first 6 months of the year, so that'll average out in the last 6 months of the year. So overall, city general fund departments are all tracking at or below budgets so far. The next slide is just the investment summary. We had $178 million invested at the end of June. Oh, this slide's a little hard to read, sorry. Federal agency bonds, federal bonds, callable bonds, and these are non-callable bonds. We have invested, and then the state pool is more like a money market account. That's short-term investments that I invest with the state. This is up from $160 million a year ago. And this is our return so far year to date. This is the state pool. You see that interest rates are slightly turned up here. The state pool pays just under 0.5% interest. This is a benchmark that I track to, which is like a 2-year bond portfolio. And so far year to date, we've earned about 0.91%, just under 1%. So we're beating our metrics, but it's not as much as we used to earn. I just point out that out of that $178 million, it's all restricted by policy or by RCW, except for about $16 million of it that is unrestricted right now of the portfolio. In summary, year-to-date trends are all positive. Construction and related businesses have led the way. Sales tax and B&O tax, I see a slowing trend. It's decreased each month throughout the year, but we continue to be positive. Upcoming expenses are some of the why we're under budget is that last retro pay that we have in August. Election expenses will be in November, and we also, surveys, I spelled that wrong, sorry about that. Yeah, surveys are also anticipated expenditure that will happen later in the year. Now I will answer any questions.
Thank you very much for the report. Committee members, any questions or feedback? Councilmember Hamel, please.
Thank you. Just going back to page 3 of the report here, the all other building categories. I just wondered what some examples of those would be. That's a pretty significant category here.
Sorry, I missed the beginning of that. Can you...
Going back to page 3, the 2016 year-to-date building activity. There, the all other category. What are some examples of that?
That would be any other permit that's not single-family, multifamily, or commercial industrial. So Rick's here too, but basically remodels, any type. So we have electrical permits, fire permits, any smaller category. We just break them into the major categories. But you also have land use, zoning, subdivision permits, and that's where we see the trend. So on a subdivision and a zoning permit, those happen first, and then you turn it into a building permit. And so you see the leading indicators of that slowing down. And also just there's been a lot of construction in a relatively short amount of time, and now that needs to be absorbed into the economy. And so we just are anticipating a little bit slower growth in the future. Same with sales tax and B&O tax. I mean, they're so linked, they're tied together that as this starts to decrease, that I'm just anticipating that the next couple of years are going to have to slow down just to catch up with some of that growth that's happened. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Mayor Kelly, did you want to say something?
Well, what the mayor was asking about, so this is the first report, so year-to-date June report. I foreshadowing some of the upcoming expenses as we go into the budget. There will be a September report that'll be short on the heels here, but the mayor was also reminding me of, we do have a lot of unfunded liabilities. So all of the good that we're talking about here, the trends are positive, the growth has been great, but our expenses are also like that. So I would say that as we get later into the year and start talking about the budget, right now these are positive trends. We do need to remember that we have a $3 million budgeted deficit for this year, and so some of these expenses just haven't hit. They'll hit later in the year. But I do think that we'll end up a little bit better than what we forecasted for 2016 or budgeted for 2016. And then we need to keep in mind that there are some unfunded liabilities. So continue to talk about the maintenance that's not been going on that we need to increase in the coming years. We also have unfunded liabilities for the fire and police pensions. That is an ongoing expense for those that are left members. And then the other big one is remediation. We have big remediation projects that are working its way through the Department of Ecology and process to figure out the best solution for those, but we don't have a way to pay for all those expenses. So the good news is that we're doing well this year, but we do have some unfunded liabilities that we need to be aware of too.
Council members, questions or feedback? Seeing none. This was our only agenda item. Thank you so much for the update. This was for information only. End of committee.